The change in my career was not gradual. It almost felt immediate. And by immediate, I mean I worked for 10 years in a place of insecurity, in a place where it felt really hard to get that next promotion, that next salary bump. But once I figured it out, once I figured out how to move through the world differently, it only took me 1 year to completely transform my life, my career, and my salary. And it didn't come from getting another degree or getting another certificate or getting another license or even working harder. If anything, I was working less. It happened the moment that I started realizing the things that were limiting myself, those internal behaviors within myself that were actually holding me back. I was holding myself back through these patterns, these behaviors, these habits, these internal habits that were limiting the security, the confidence that I had in my decisions, that were making me shrink myself in meetings or even mute my presence. And all of this was capping my earning potential. So no, okay, I didn't become more skilled overnight, but I did stop over-explaining and apologizing for my presence. I stopped shrinking in rooms where I belonged in, even though I thought that I didn't. I stopped operating from a place of fear, from a place of insecurity, from a place of lack of self-worth. And I started operating from a place of genuine confidence, genuine feeling of self-worth. And all of this gave me some authority, gave me a little bit of authority in my voice, in my presence, in how I showed up in meetings and how I showed up in my professional world. So that shift in myself, where I started becoming aware of my own behaviors, of my own internal patterns that were showing up in my professional career, was ultimately what led to me changing how I showed up in those rooms, changing how I showed up in my career. And that in turn changed how everyone responded to me. It changed how executive leadership responded to me, how clients were responding to me, how my colleagues were responding to me. And that's what ultimately led me to double my salary in 1 year. So what I want to do in this video is show you the exact internal shifts that I did that helped me make that possible. So that hopefully by the end of this video, you'll be able to start thinking about what are the internal shifts that you yourself are going to have to do. First though, let me tell you my story, because each of our individual stories is what's going to lead us to start understanding what are those specific behaviors that we each have. They're different for everyone, but they all come from our story. First off, my story is I'm Latina. I'm an immigrant. I came from a poverty background, from a pretty unstable home, first generation to go to college, first generation Latina to be in this country. All of these things that really, really impacted how I saw myself in the world from a very young age. Not just in college where it felt completely foreign to me, but starting from a young age, being in a kindergarten class where I didn't understand what anyone was saying, where I felt like I didn't belong and I cried and cried for days before I started feeling comfortable. Taking that with me where I'm being told I'm an immigrant and I'm taking the space of someone else, not your space. You don't belong here. It's only one of the things that really impacted the way that I showed up in my adult world, because all of these early experiences are what you bring into your adult world, whether you like it or not, whether you want to agree with it or not. It is what is happening. All of your early experiences are what molds you and are what you bring into your adult world, your professional world. And the thing is, in order for me to have this ambitious career that I wanted, I needed to improve. But every single time I looked for feedback, the feedback was always very skill-based. You need to learn how to do this. You need to have 10 years of experience. You need to get your engineering license in order to do this, which yes, but what we don't understand is that is just maybe 50% of the whole story. And the reality is that in your corporate world, in your professional life, in your career, no one is going to be able to tell you those little things, those very personal things that are actually holding you back, unless you have a very brave mentor or a very brave manager who is willing to work with you in a more genuine, personal, in a deeper place, which is very rare. So for me, concentrating on just that little one, because honestly, I bring a whole plethora of internal behaviors, internal habits that I brought from my internal wounds, from my personal wounds into the professional world, but then we would be here a very long time. So concentrating on that one very specific one where I genuinely felt like I didn't belong, Like I was here taking up someone's space and I felt like a burden the entire time I was in college, the entire time I was trying to get my master's degree, and especially when I got my first job as an engineer. So that very specific way of thinking made me shrink everywhere and made me not want to speak up anywhere because I thought I was taking someone's space and I didn't belong. It made me be overly people pleasing. I wanted to thank everyone and make sure that they knew how thankful I was for the opportunity of working for them. And don't get me wrong, being grateful is a very good trait. However, I was in this very people pleasing where I wanted to make sure that everyone liked me. Everyone wanted to work with me, that I over-delivered, that I was perfect, which I wasn't. But this was my idea. If I over-delivered, if I got people to like me, then I was going to be allowed to remain in the space. That was something that I brought with myself. And that it really impacted the way that I moved in my professional world, because you don't see that type of behavior in very strong leaders, in people who have grown in those careers, in those very ambitious careers, going through the executive route or the management route or whichever route it is that you want to be. Those type of habits were really not part of the leader that I wanted to become. And no one really pointed it out. So apart from this very specific habits, there were a lot of other things that I needed to work on, but I did not recognize it in myself. So I kept getting really good opportunities, but also it always felt like I was struggling because I was working so hard, because I was resilient, because all of these good character traits that also came from how I grew up. It helped me grow in my career, but it was so hard. It was so difficult. It always felt like I was trying to run uphill with a weighted backpack. That's the best way I could describe it. It felt so hard to get any of these, and all of these career aspirations that I had should have been very manageable. But for the first 10 years, they felt so difficult. And this is what I mean, that change can be so immediate, because you can spend 10 years like I did working really hard, but without really understanding what it is that is holding you back, what it is that is preventing you from becoming that great leader or that next level of yourself. For me, it was becoming a leader in my industry. Then you're never going to be able to get to that place that you want easily. It'll happen very hard, and it'll happen throughout many years. So I'm at year 8, 9, whatever year it is, and I'm still struggling to get these ambitious career goals that I have. I decide to leave my position. I decide to start somewhere fresh. I decide I want to do something different for myself, but not just in terms of my career. I wanted to spend a year working on myself, concentrate on myself completely. My mental health, my traumas, those personal wounds. I wanted to go to therapy. I wanted to do all of these things that really could help me get myself out of that place of the lack of self-worth, because it wasn't just showing up at work, it was showing up everywhere. Obviously, my personal life the most, but because we can't separate who we are in our professional world from our personal world, it was definitely seeping in my professional career. So I spent a year in therapy. But as you all may know, therapy is a very personal space. And as much as it helped me understand myself a lot more, it wasn't going to change or transcend into my professional career unless I made that happen for myself, unless I figured out that understanding of myself, that radical self-awareness of myself that I was developing in my personal life. I had to bring it into my professional life. And that's what I did. It is very painful. It is a very vulnerable process. Coming into your professional world where you're thinking, you know what, I'm great. I have all of these degrees. I get all of this amazing feedback. I have all of this evidence that I am really good at what I do, that I am the A player in my career, and then I can take my career anywhere I want. So it's really hard to recognize, actually, all of these things that are within you personally are showing up at work. All of these personal wounds are showing up at work, whether you like it or not. And they're showing up in a way that you don't even realize because you think you're just working. But for me, for example, they were showing up in ways where I was defensive. I was being a people pleaser. I couldn't stand my ground because any amount of conflict made me very anxious and made me difficult. And I had to make sure that everyone liked me. And if someone didn't like me, I had a really hard time working with them. That's not great in your professional world. Being defensive is not great in your professional world, especially if you're going to become a leader. Defensiveness is very much not something that you want as a character trait. And the thing is, we think all of these are part of who we are. They're just our personality, right? I am defensive, but it's because I'm strong and I like to stand my ground, and that's just who I am. And it's really hard to say, my defensiveness is holding me back. It makes me have a really hard time understand where I can improve. It also makes me have a really hard time create relationships with colleagues and having people look at me as a true leader. It's really hard to understand that. And the next part is it's really hard to understand how to stop being defensive. How do you create different habits that replace those habits that are holding you back? So here's what I did. And at first it was really messy. It had no structure. I was just kind of going through that year trying to figure out how to be less defensive, trying to figure out how to identify the habits that were holding me back at work, and then figure out a plan on how to fix them or how to replace them with a different habit. And in my experience, the first part was just kind of hating myself a little bit. Whenever I reacted very quickly and I was defensive and I responded very quickly to someone, then I felt horrible and I had this need to apologize to them, to go back to them later on and say, hey, I'm so sorry I reacted that way. But even when I apologized to them, it never took away that feeling of kind of that I had failed myself. That person that I wanted to become, those habits that I wanted to develop, I couldn't do it. I kept failing and failing and failing. But the reality is, the first part is going to be a lot of failing, because it is really, really hard to change your habits and change yourself and stop looking at these traits as a personality trait, a character trait, a part of who you are, your identity. It's very difficult to change your identity. First, you have to do it for yourself though, and then you can do it outwardly. So at first it was very messy. I was trying to figure out what I was really bad at. And then it became much clearer on how I could work on myself. I knew that first I had to identify all the behaviors, all the habits that were holding me back. For me, it was really easy because there was a ton that were just low-hanging fruits that I could just grab and work on. Once you get through those, it becomes much more difficult and you might need some feedback from people. And then figure out the trigger. What is making you react, or what is making you fall into the trap of continuing that behavior or that habit that came from those personal wounds, that came from the way you grew up, that followed you into adulthood. Once you figure out the trigger, it's easy to understand, oh shoot, that's going to make me feel defensive. That's going to make me feel anxious. That's going to make me want to people please so that people start arguing with each other. But this is the first step, identifying those issues, figuring out the trigger that brings up those issues. Because the moment that you're able to name the behavior, to name the actual thing that you do, it takes away its power. And you can stop justifying it. If you're consciously, truly trying to engage with a better version of yourself, to bring that better version of yourself, to embrace that version of yourself that is already within you, you're just trying to engage with it and make it genuinely part of who you are. It's a little bit difficult because trying to change those personality traits feels a little bit disingenuous. But the moment you identify, you name that pattern, you name that behavior, you're taking away its power. You stop justifying it. It's not okay for me to be defensive. It's not okay for me to react defensively in a professional situation. You stop identifying with it. I am not a defensive person. I can sometimes be defensive, but I am not a defensive person. So stop giving it power. Stop seeing yourself as that trait, as that behavioral pattern, because that way you'll take away its control over you. So stop identifying with that specific trait, with that pattern, with that behavior. Stop letting it embody you. Once you become radically self-aware of all those patterns, I don't know, pick 3 because it does become overwhelming, then you're able to start collapsing that pattern. And here's what I keep saying, it does not take time. That's why I'm saying that change can be immediate, because it doesn't take time to be self-aware. It just takes courage to want to be self-aware. So you might think it takes a lot of time to work through mental blocks. I have to work on myself a lot, which yes, you do. But the moment you allow yourself to be open to self-awareness, to identifying those patterns, then you're able to address them. Because truly recognizing them does not take time. Recognizing them just means allowing yourself the courage, the vulnerability to be self-aware, to identify them and to name them. And once you do, once you identify them, once you name them, then you can actually address them. And that's what might take a little bit of time, because what might take time is being able to execute on changing that internal pattern, because it has a lot to do with reframing our stories, right? I came from an immigrant background where I felt that I didn't belong, and that in turn made me feel small. It made me feel insignificant. It made me lack self-worth, which then in turn turned into a lot of people pleasing, being defensive at work, right? That's my story. So what's going to take a little bit of time is reframing that story internally inside of myself. Yes, I came from an immigrant background where it felt like I didn't belong. So what? I do belong. I have an engineering degree in structural engineering. I have a master's in project management. I have all of this evidence that shows that I do belong. And that story, that immigrant story of mine, made me resilient. It made me hardworking. It made me want to do something with my life. And it made me want to have this beautiful career, this big career, so that I can make my parents proud, so that they can see that their goals of finding a better life for their children became true. And for myself, so that I could have this beautiful life that I want to create for myself. And that's what made me have that internal shift from feeling like I didn't belong to someone who knows that does belong and that provides value. So all of that work really changed the way that I thought of myself. I no longer thought, am I good enough to be in this room? Am I good enough for this role? Can I actually do this? Can I be in this space and provide value? Which is what was happening in my brain, coming from that lack of self-worth, from that insecurity of myself. And so all of this work that I did in reframing my story, on working on my internal patterns, really helped with my self-worth and with the way that I thought of myself. So now instead of asking, am I good enough for this? I ask, this is a stretch role. What kind of resources am I going to need? What is the role actually going to require from me? And how can I make sure I am successful in executing? What kind of help am I going to need? See that change? And the reason that people find it very, very difficult to do this internal shift and concentrate fully on the technical skills, on the extra certifications, on even the soft communication skills and the soft leadership skills, which are very important when it comes to becoming a leader, but it's not the full formula, have a really hard time with this because this requires a lot of discomfort. It's not hustle, which is what most people want to do. They want to work really hard in order to get that promotion, that salary. It's not putting your head down and doing that. And unfortunately, that's what we associate with success. It's so difficult to make this internal shift because it really challenges your identity, not your skill. And that hurt my ego a lot because I would think I worked so hard. I got all of these degrees. I read that book. I took that program. I took that training. I worked overtime so I could expand my skills and really get it done and be really good at my job. But that's the easy part because you could easily develop a path on how to gain the skills. You can write it down. Okay, I'm going to get that engineering degree, then I'm going to get that license, and then I'm going to get that training. I'm going to do that course. I'm going to put in 100 hours to become a subject matter expert. That is such a clear path to take. But when it comes to challenging your identity and how you move into the world, it is not as clear. It can be very muddy. Eventually, it'll become very clear. But at the beginning, it is really difficult. Again, because it's about understanding yourself, because it's about being vulnerable, because it's about being self-aware, and it's about letting go of those internal patterns that create a lot of self-sabotage in your career. And it means letting go of that identity that helped you survive. And that's the hardest skill to achieve. If you want to learn about why you can't just outperform your identity and put your head down and achieve your goals through just putting your head down, go ahead and subscribe. I love to do all sorts of videos on identity and leadership and how these really impact how we grow in our careers. I love you so much, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye, everyone.